Welcome to Tea for Me, Please. Today I have joining me Michael Coffey of Tea Geek and Eric Scott. So thank you guys for joining in and offering your expertise. Chinese pronunciations are not my strong point, but I know they're something that a lot of tea drinkers struggle with. So I guess to start, do you guys want to kind of introduce yourselves a little bit before we get into the word list?
I'm Michael Coffey, ironically. My dad's name is Joe, and neither of us drink any coffee. I started Tea Geek a million years ago. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, something like that, I don't know, as a tea educational thing, so that's what I do. Every other week, I do a hangout with Eric, so I'll let him sort of talk about that and his background.
Sure. Hi, I'm Eric, and I used to work at a tea shop. I used to work at Happy Lucky's Tea House in Fort Collins, Colorado. Now I'm a grad student at Tufts University tea-related project. And Michael and I do a couple things. We do this bi-weekly, every other week. I can't remember which is which. Every other week, hang out on Google Plus, the Tea Salon, which is just sort of an informal gathering of tea people who want to learn more about tea, people that are in the tea industry. And we usually pick a topic, and somebody gives a short presentation, and we kind of just chat and have fun. And we also do Let's Talk Tea, which is a hangout on air like this one, where we interview experts in tea.
One of the issues with pronunciations and everything else like that is that there's multiple spellings of most words, which can make it even harder sometimes. So, Michael, can you explain a little bit about why that is?
So, well, let me, we're going to use an example here. Pu'er is one of the words, and if you can see the screen there, this is currently the official way to spell it in the top one in English characters, but really how it's spelled is that way, right? Like, that's really how the Chinese write the word, and so that's how you quote-unquote spell it. And so where all of those other weird spellings come from is the fact that different people have different ways of converting the pronunciation of that into Roman character.
Which is called Romanization or transliteration, right?
Right. Absolutely. So there's all kinds of different methods for doing that. The current official method, both in mainland China and in Taiwan, is called pinyin, P-I-N-Y-I-N, and that's what that P-U-apostrophe-E-R, that's what that represents. But there are older systems that used to be used, like the Chinese postal system had its own way of transliterating Chinese characters, and then linguists, had different ways of doing it. So,
so I know, the word you just showed is pu'er. I've heard more different pronunciations of that word than I can count, probably. And I'm guilty of totally switching up from time to time because I'm never really sure exactly.
Yeah, it's pu'er. Okay, so another wrinkle. Where you are.
Right, there's multiple languages spoken in China, and
right,
and dialects within those.
Yeah, multiple languages, multiple dialects. So Pu'er is the Mandarin, the official, supposedly countrywide language. It'd be the equivalent of received pronunciation or BBC English in England, right? So Pu'er would be that's the way you say that, but the people who make it wouldn't pronounce it that way. They pronounce it well. I don't speak any of the other languages. In Cantonese, it's something like "boile."
Yeah, boile.
Something in that same characters, right? But how it's said in the local language is pronounced differently than. There's not a very good. Other than sort of having an accent, there isn't really a way to explain that in English. That it could be written identically, but different people would say it completely.
I know I've seen a lot of companies, especially here in the U.S., pronouncing it pu'er, very much emphasizing the air part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's more like er. And if you really want to get fancy with it, the R is kind of like you curl your tongue back. It's like R. But
I feel like I'm in high school Spanish class and they're telling me to roll my R's.
Yeah,
that's actually really helpful.
It's one of those sounds that isn't very common in English, but yeah, is closer than air.
Okay. And so the second word on our list is I pronounce it Yixing, like a purple clay teapot. So that's another one that I've seen a million different spellings and a million different pronunciations.
My understanding is that the Y is kind of silent. Is that correct?
Yeah. So
that's common mispronunciation, I think, is saying the Y.
And the X. The X.
I haven't heard that, but I can see how that would be confusing.
Yeah. The X is not pronounced the way it is in English. And the reason for that is there's two sounds in Chinese. There's that in English you would spell the same way, but in Chinese they're different sounds. They're considered, like, why would you mix those two up? And one is sh, and that's spelled S-H, and then there's sh, which is X. So the X sound is kind of like almost like a hiss rather than an SH.
Then a shush, like shush.
Yeah, so it's halfway between SH and S. Kind of.
Mm-hmm.
But I tell people, if you see an X, just assume it's an SH, and unless you're speaking to a native Chinese speaker, you're fine. Here's Yixing, and there's two different sets of characters.
Yeah.
The one on the left is traditional, the traditional way of writing it, which is how it would be written in most places outside of mainland China. And then on the right is how those are the simplified characters, and that's how you would find it in China itself. So in the 50s or 60s, they went through this process of trying to simplify the characters in order to try and make literacy easier. And so they redid a whole bunch of the characters to decrease how many strokes there are to write them and so forth. So both of those say Yixing. Not that you have to write it, but Yixing.
And I know one that I was definitely guilty of until fairly recently was Tea Guanyin. It's almost like your English-speaking brain automatically wants to say Thai because it's spelled T-I-E.
Yeah, well, it gets even worse. No, it doesn't get worse. It gets better.
Yeah.
It gets better. So, okay, so let's ignore the first word and just go with Guanyin.
Okay.
Most people say Guanyin. Eric, you were right in saying the Y is kind of silent. So really it's pronounced a little bit more like in rather than yin. But Guanyin or Guanyin, that's fine. But the first word, T-I-E, again, that's that in official spelling, and in official Mandarin, it's tie. But having been there, the area where they make it, I asked a couple of people, how do you say this in Mandarin? And they'd say Tia Guanyin, and I said, how do you pronounce it? And they'd say Ti Guanyin. So the local dialect pronounces that character T, just like we say the word, cup of tea.
Yeah, because I know I've definitely had customers who pronounced it as Tea Guanyin. It kind of does depend on where they're from, because I've also had closer to how you said the official Mandarin would be.
Yeah, so tie. So you just add a little bit of an eh at the end of it would be the official Mandarin. But yeah, well, and sometimes you'll see it spelled Ti, in which case you're pronouncing it like the locals.
Two words that I also see some people have trouble with is for raw and cooked pu'er. I've heard shang and shung and shu and shou. And
out of those four, 3 of them are right. Yeah, I know.
That's not bad odds.
Yeah. Green pu'er or unfermented pu'er, or all of the things that you could refer that to, the original style of doing it. That's one of those things that the E has a very specific way it's pronounced in Chinese, and it sounds a little bit like a U, or if you're a linguist, a schwa, kind of that unstressed.
Yeah, it sounds like sung, but with an SH or something.
And the cooked kind, or the ripe kind, or black pu'er, or any of those other translations, the Chinese actually pronounce it two different ways, the same character. So shu and shou.
So that's why there's two different spellings in English.
Yes.
And there's two different romanizations, right? There's SHU.
There's two different romanizations, yeah, because there's two different pronunciations.
Ooh, so those are both okay.
So those are both okay, yeah.
Ah.
I've heard some Chinese speakers say there's shades of meaning depending on which one you do. And I can't remember what those shades are, but like, shu would be used for like actual cooked food, and shou would be used for things that are kind of, what's the word I want?
Like ripe rather than cooked?
Yeah, like ripe or something like that, right. Like that kind of a distinction, and I've heard other people say that it's a distinction, it's an accent distinction.
Well, that's good to know that I'm not wrong on at least one thing.
Yeah.
One of my favorite teas that I definitely mispronounced for a long time, in part because really for the longest time I was what I call an internet tea drinker. I did lots of drinking tea and lots of reading about it, but I never actually heard anyone say these words in person.
Right.
So I believe it's Dan Song, but in English...
I said this wrong for a long time. Yeah, Dan Cong.
It is not Cong. Because, again, that trying to transliterate, just the C by itself, if it's at the beginning, in Pinyin, the rules are it's pronounced with like a TS sound, Cong. But that's where geography comes in. When I went to China, we landed in Shanghai, which is about halfway south in the country, and then we kind of followed the coast southward. And in Shanghai, I had no trouble with Chinese, meaning I did as well as I could. But the further south we went, the harder it was to even understand people that were speaking Mandarin, like not even the local language, or the local dialect. And that word or that pronunciation is one that shifts a lot. So you'll hear Cong, like with a TS, and you'll also hear Chong with like a CH kind of sound. And so that one's a little wigglier, but it's only English speakers that pronounce it with like a K sound.
Does that K sound exist?
Yeah, it's spelled with a K.
Mandarin?
In Pinyin.
With a K. K's are K's, C's are never K. C's are, so there's no hard C in Pinyin.
There is no hard C in Pinyin. Yeah.
See, there's another one. Watch out for C's. C's and X's.
Well, yeah, you can say that. You can say that about C's in English.
That's true. Just C's in general, tricky.
Yeah.
Don't trust them.
Yeah. So Dan Song or Dan Chong, those are kind of how you'd.
Okay, great. And I know Tony Gebley had commented that he thought Keeman was a fun one. That one in particular, I know I've seen many, many, many ways. For a long time, most places I've seen spelled it Keemun.
I've got one that's MUM.
Yeah, lots of K. There's also the QIMEN or QIMUN or.
The QI is it would be the Pinyin Mandarin spelling, QIMEN. But like we were talking about with the X, because the Q is an uncommon letter, they use it to represent one of those sounds that is not really Englishy. And so in this case, it's sort of like a CH. If the X is like SH, then the Q is like CH. So QI is chi. In fact, when people talk about chi, like the energy, like I can feel your chi or whatever, that's actually spelled QI in Mandarin now, in Pinyin. It used to be spelled CHI in an old transliteration. And the E, like we talked about before, the MEN, the E is like in sheng, it has that U sound. So QI is chi, and MEN is mun. So chi mun.
Which is why sometimes it's spelled MUN and sometimes MEN, because it's really in between those two letters.
Right. Yeah, the pronunciation is kind of in that middle space that's hard for English speakers to kind of grasp. And I'll say I took my first my first Chinese class in the early 90s. And then it kind of went by the wayside, and I started up again, 5 years ago, something like that. So I've had a little bit of practice, but it's I still run into people who are like, why do you say it that way? I'm like, because the last Chinese speaker I spoke to said that that's how you're supposed to say it. Oh, no, you're supposed to say it this way, right? So, I'm speaking from my experience, but I'm not fluent or, good enough to get around. But
what's the deal with the K spelling, the K? Because that doesn't seem like it would be pronounced Chiman at all.
Yeah, my memory is that the K the spelling with a K, is from that the Postal Service transliteration.
Okay.
So the T, Chiman, is the name of the county that tea is made in. And if you've seen the paintings with kind of the tall rocky cliffs with kind of a windswept pine, those are at least inspired by the Yellow Mountain area, Huangshan, and the Chimen County is in that same area. And so, since it's the name of a county, it would be on addresses.
Eric also brought up, Pouchong and Baozong, that are both used to describe the same teas. And they're generally used for Taiwanese, but it's pretty much a Chinese term. And so where do those come from?
So are those different romanizations? You said them differently. Are they different romanizations of the same pronunciation, or are they actually different things?
Well, I understood that as trying to pronounce the spelling.
Yeah.
As opposed to trying to pronounce the word. Yeah, again, this is one of those things where language in Taiwan can actually be fairly political because of both Taiwan versus China and because of the Chinese that came from China and now are kind of running the government, and then the people that were there before that migration. So there's lots of complexities, and language is one of the ways that those come out. And so there's some... it's a little bit more complicated. Baozhong is how most of the people that I've talked to have said it, or close enough to it. So Baozhong, so the B-A-O, Bao, is probably the closest. And then the ZH is one of those things where it's a Chinese-only sound, but a J is pretty close. Zhong, or sometimes you hear a little bit of a zong, almost like it's a Z sound, Baozong, but again, politics, location, accent,
If you think about like the shape that your mouth makes, B's and P's are pretty much the same. Like they're very, very slightly different as far as your mouth shape. So it makes sense for those to be, two different ways of spelling or transliterating the same word.
Pinyin, in my opinion, is an easier way because these little differences that were done with punctuation before are actually done with different letters, and that seems more accessible.
Yeah.
From someone who speaks a language where letters represent sounds and punctuation does not.
Yeah.
I read an interesting article on that tea a few weeks ago, I guess. It said that basically it kind of means the wrapped kind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because they used to wrap
too.
paper.
Yeah. Bao. Bao means like a package or a wrapping, and zhong is like variety or type.
Yeah.
Cultivar. What we would say cultivar is pinzhong. So it's that kind of a
wrapped in what?
Paper.
But like how? Like in cake?
Wait right there. I'll be right back. No, because I think I have an example that I can show. It's not actually baozhong, but it is baozhong. It is a.
It's a wrapped kind, but it's not the wrapped kind.
It is a tea that is wrapped in paper that I can show you. Okay. So hold on a second.
I think I know what you're bringing.
So this is Tieluohan.
Oh, I guessed wrong.
Which I got when I was in Canada, and so it's a cliff tea, but it came in this little tin. And inside it has these little.
Oh, it is what
these little packages, and it's so this is a single serving of cliff tea, and it's wrapped into this little square of paper, and you just rip it open, and there's your serving.
Okay, so it's basically what they did before they invented like the foil packets that we use now.
Sure, yeah. Now I don't know if it would have come this way or if it would have been wrapped in a bigger quantity. I don't know if it was single serving kind of thing, but this is just as soon as I pulled it out of the box, I was like, oh, baozhong. and it's just got kind of like a envelope type fold in the back.
Well, thank you both so much for taking the time to lend your thoughts and expertise on pronunciations.
Yeah, thanks so much. It was fun.
Thanks for having me.